Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. David recognized the wisdom in Abigail's words and called off his plan for vengeance. In 1 Samuel 25:32-33 he replied, David said to Abigail, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands." Abigail returned home and found Nabal holding a feast fit for a king. He was so drunk that she waited until the next morning to tell him what had happened. In 1 Samuel 25:37-38 we read, "Then in the morning when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him and he became like a stone. About 10 days later the Lord struck Nabal and he died." When David heard of Nabal's death, he saw it as divine justice. In 1 Samuel 25:39 he declared, "Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head." Impressed by Abigail's wisdom and beauty, David sent messengers to ask for her hand in marriage. In 1 Samuel 25:41-42 we read her reply. She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, "I am your servant and am ready to serve you, and wash the feet of my Lord's servants." Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife. David had found a wife who was not only beautiful, but also wise, discreet, and courageous, qualities that would prove invaluable for the wife of a future king. The reconciliation between Saul and David didn't last long. Soon, the king was once again pursuing David with 3,000 chosen men in the wilderness of Ziph. David sent out spies and learned exactly where Saul was encamped. Then in 1 Samuel 26:5-7, we see a bold decision. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. Saul was lying inside the camp with the army encamped around him. David asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, "Who will go down with me into the camp to Saul?" "I'll go with you," said Abishai. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul, lying asleep inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head. It was an extremely dangerous mission. If they were discovered, they wouldn't stand a chance against the entire army. But David wanted to prove once again that he had no desire to harm Saul. When they reached the place where the king lay asleep, Abishai saw the perfect opportunity. In 1 Samuel 26:8 he whispered, Abishai said to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't need to strike him twice." But David, just as he had done in the cave of En-Gedi, refused to kill Saul. In 1 Samuel 26:9-11, he explained his decision. But David said to Abishai, "Don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and water jug that are near his head and let's go." So David took the spear and the water jug that were near Saul's head, and they left. No one saw them, no one knew, and no one woke up. A deep sleep from the Lord had fallen on Saul and all his men. David then went up to a hilltop some distance away and called out to Saul's camp. But he didn't speak directly to the king. Instead, he addressed Abner, the commander of the army. In 1 Samuel 26:15-16, we read David's rebuke. David said to Abner, "Aren't you going to answer me, Abner?" Abner replied, "Who? Are you who calls to the king?" David said, "You're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard your lord the king? Someone came to destroy your lord the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must die, because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where are the king's spear and water jug that were near his head?" Saul recognized David's voice and asked, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" David then asked why the king was pursuing him, what wrong he had done. In 1 Samuel 26:20, he uses a moving metaphor. "Now do not let my blood fall to the ground, far from the presence of the Lord. The king of Israel has come out to look for a flea, as one hunts a partridge in the mountains." For the second time, Saul acknowledged his wrongdoing. In 1 Samuel 26:21, he confessed, "I have sinned. Come back, David, my son. Because you considered my life precious today, I will not try to harm you again. Surely I have acted like a fool and have been terribly wrong." David returned the king's spear, declaring that just as he had valued Saul's life, he hoped the Lord would value his own life and deliver him from all troubles. In 1 Samuel 26:25, Saul blessed him. Then Saul said to David, "May you be blessed, David, my son. You will do great things and surely triumph." So they parted ways. Saul returned home, and David went on his way. Once again, there was reconciliation. But David knew he couldn't trust Saul's words. Even after this second act of mercy, David remained a hunted man, a fugitive in his own land. After 2 encounters with Saul that ended in temporary reconciliations, David made a drastic decision. In 1 Samuel 27:1, we see his thoughts. But David thought to himself, "One of these days I will be destroyed by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand." It was an extreme choice. The Philistines were Israel's greatest enemies. David had killed their champion, Goliath, and the women of Israel had sung about the tens of thousands of Philistines he had defeated. Even so, David judged it safer to live among the enemy than to continue fleeing from Saul. With 600 men and their families, David left for Gath, seeking protection from Achish, the Philistine king. This was very different from his first visit to Gath, when he had pretended to be insane to escape. Now he came as a leader with a small army, offering his services to the Philistine king. In 1 Samuel 27:4, we see the result of this move. When Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. David's plan had worked. After a while, David asked a favor from King Achish. In 1 Samuel 27:5-6, we read, David said to Achish, "If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be assigned to me in one of the country towns, so I can live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you?" So, on that day, Achish gave him Ziklag, and it has belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. This arrangement suited David perfectly. Living in Ziklag, away from Achish's direct oversight, gave him more freedom to act. David remained in Philistine territory for a year and 4 months. During that time, David regularly raided the peoples who had lived in the region since ancient times, the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. These were long-standing enemies of Israel, especially the Amalekites, whom God had commanded to be destroyed. But when Achish asked about his activities, David gave a different account. In 1 Samuel 27:10-11, we see his strategy of double allegiance. When Achish asked, "Where did you go raiding today?" then David would say, "Against the Negev of Judah, or against the Negev of the Jerahmeelites, or against the Negev of the Kenites." He did not leave a man or woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he thought they might inform on us and say, "This is what David did." By attacking Israel's enemies while reporting that he was attacking the Israelites themselves, David was pulling off a dangerous ruse. He was protecting his people while appearing to betray them. To complete the deception, he left no survivors who could reveal the truth to Achish. The Philistine king was completely deceived. In 1 Samuel 27:12, we read his assessment of the situation. Achish trusted David and thought, "He has become so obnoxious to his people, the Israelites, that he will be my servant for life." This was a complex time in David's life. On one hand, he was serving Israel by defeating its historic enemies. On the other hand, he was living as a vassal of the Philistines and deceiving his benefactor. It was a morally ambiguous position, born from the desperate circumstances that Saul had forced upon him. As David lived this double life among the Philistines, a major crisis was looming for Israel. The Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. Achish told David, "You and your men must accompany me in the army." The Philistines assembled their troops at Shunem, while Saul gathered all of Israel and camped at Gilboa. In 1 Samuel 28:5-6, we see the fear that gripped Saul. When Saul saw the Philistine army, he was afraid. Terror filled his heart. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams or Urim or prophets. It was a desperate situation. The Philistines had assembled a vast army, and God was silent. The divine silence revealed that Saul had truly been rejected. All legitimate channels of communication with God, dreams, the Urim used by priests, and prophets, were closed. Saul then made a decision that showed just how far he had fallen from his original faith. In 1 Samuel 28:7, he commanded, "Find me a medium, so I may go and inquire of her." This order was tragically ironic, since Saul himself had expelled the mediums and spiritists from Israel in obedience to the law of Moses, which prohibited necromancy. Now, in desperation, he sought the very thing he had once banned. His servants mentioned a medium living in Endor. Saul disguised himself, wearing different clothes, and went to visit her at night with two men. In 1 Samuel 28:9-10, we read their initial exchange. But the woman said to him, "Surely you know what Saul has done. He has cut off the mediums and spiritists from the land. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death?" Saul swore to her by the Lord, "As surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this." Convinced by the oath, the woman asked whom she should summon. Saul replied, "Bring up Samuel." When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out in a loud voice and realized that the disguised man was Saul himself. The king calmed her and asked what she saw. In 1 Samuel 28:13-14, the woman said, "I see a ghostly figure coming up out of the earth." "What does he look like?" he asked. "An old man wearing a robe is coming up," she said. Then Saul knew it was Samuel, and he bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. What followed was a disturbing conversation. In 1 Samuel 28:15-16, Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" Saul replied, "I am in great distress. The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has departed from me. He no longer answers me either by prophets or by dreams. So I have called on you to tell me what to do." Samuel said, "Why do you consult me now that the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy?" Samuel reminded Saul that the Lord had done exactly what he had foretold through him. The kingdom was torn from Saul's hands and given to David. This happened because Saul had disobeyed the Lord and failed to carry out his wrath against the Amalekites. Then came the final devastating prophecy. In 1 Samuel 28:19, Samuel declares, "The Lord will deliver both Israel and you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also give the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." Saul immediately collapsed full length on the ground, paralyzed with fear at Samuel's words. He had not eaten all day or night and was now completely without strength. Seeing his condition, the medium prepared a meal for him. Though he initially refused, he eventually gave in at the insistence of her and his officials. After the meal, Saul and his men left that same night, carrying with them the certainty of defeat and impending death. The rejected king was now walking toward his final destiny, marked by divine condemnation. While Saul faced his grim fate, David was in an equally difficult position. As a vassal of Achish, he was being called to fight alongside the Philistines, against his own people. It was a conflict of loyalties that placed him in an impossible situation. The Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, while Israel camped beside the spring at Jezreel. As the Philistine rulers marched with their units of hundreds and thousands, David and his men followed at the rear with Achish. In 1 Samuel 29:3-5, we see doubts quickly arise about David's presence. The Philistine commanders asked, "What about these Hebrews?" Achish replied, "Is this not David, who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel? He has already been with me for over a year, and from the day he left Saul until now, I have found no fault in him." But the Philistine commanders were angry and said, "Send the man back to the place you assigned him. He must not go with us into battle, or he may turn against us during the fighting. How better could he regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? Isn't this the David they sang about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." The Philistine commander's suspicion was justified. Why would David fight against his own people? Wasn't it far more likely that he would turn against the Philistines in the heat of battle? Still, Achish trusted David. In 1 Samuel 29:6-7, he explained his decision. So Achish called David and said to him, "As surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve with me in the army. From the day you came to me until today, I have found no fault in you, but the rulers don't approve of you. Now turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistine rulers." David protested, asking what he had done wrong and why he couldn't fight against the king's enemies. But Achish stood firm, though he spoke well of him. In 1 Samuel 29:9-10, he replies, Achish answered, "I know that you have been as pleasing in my eyes as an angel of God." Nevertheless, the Philistine commanders have said, "He must not go up with us into battle. Now get up early in the morning, along with your master's servants who came with you, and leave as soon as it's light." David's insistence might seem odd, but it was likely just an act, meant to maintain his appearance of loyalty in Achish's eyes. In truth, this dismissal was a providential intervention. David was being spared from an impossible situation, either fight against his own people or betray the trust of Achish. In 1 Samuel 29:11 we read, "So David and his men got up early in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to Jezreel. David and his men marched back to Ziklag, while the Philistines continued on to battle against Israel. What seemed like a disappointment for David was, in fact, a deliverance. He wouldn't have to choose between his conflicting loyalties. He wouldn't have to fight his own people or risk the lives of his men in an open betrayal of the Philistines. However, a terrible surprise awaited him upon his return to Ziklag. In 1 Samuel 30:1-2, we learn what they found. David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had raided the Negev and Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag and burned it, and had taken captive the women and everyone else in it, both young and old. They killed none of them, but carried them off as they went on their way. While David was away, the Amalekites, the very people he had regularly attacked, had taken revenge by raiding the city and carrying off the women and children, including David's two wives, Ahinoam and Abigail. Deliverance from one impossible battle had led to another crisis. But at least this time, David was facing an enemy he could confront head-on, with all his strength and determination. While David faced his own crisis with the Amalekites, Saul and Israel's fate was being sealed on the battlefield. In 1 Samuel 31:1, we see the battle begin. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell dead on Mount Gilboa. The location was strategic. The Philistines had advanced into Jezreel, deep in Israelite territory, effectively splitting the nation in two. Mount Gilboa, where the decisive battle occurred, was situated at the eastern end of the Jezreel Valley. Soon the fighting focused around the king and his sons. In 1 Samuel 31:2, we learn of the royal family's fate. The Philistines were in hot pursuit of Saul and his sons, and they killed his sons Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. Jonathan, David's loyal friend, died defending his father and his nation. The prince, who had given up his right to the throne in favor of David, remained faithful to the end. Saul's situation became desperate. In 1 Samuel 31:3-4, we read his final moments. The fighting grew fierce around Saul, and when the archers overtook him, they wounded him critically. Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and abuse me." But his armor-bearer was terrified and would not do it, so Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died with him. That day, Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men died together. The defeat was devastating for Israel. In 1 Samuel 31:7, we see the immediate impact. When the Israelites along the valley and those across the Jordan saw that the Israelite army had fled and that Saul and his sons had died, they abandoned their towns and fled. And the Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, as the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found the bodies of Saul and his sons on Mount Gilboa. In 1 Samuel 31:9-10, we see the king's final humiliation. They cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and they sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temple of their idols and among their people. They put his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths and fastened his body to the wall of Beth-shan. The desecration of Saul's and his sons' bodies was the ultimate disgrace, a tragic end for Israel's first king. But not everyone forgot the good Saul had done in the early days of his reign. In 1 Samuel 31:11-13, we see one last act of loyalty and honor. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their valiant men journeyed through the night to Beth-shan. They took down the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Beth-shan and went to Jabesh, where they burned them. Then they took their bones and buried them under a tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they fasted 7 days. The men of Jabesh Gilead remembered that years earlier, Saul had been their deliverer when Nahash the Ammonite had threatened them. They risked their lives to recover the bodies of the king and his sons and to give them a proper burial. Thus ended the reign of Saul. The first king of Israel, who began with so much promise, ended in tragedy. His downfall had been sealed by his own disobedience, and his fate foretold by the prophet who had anointed him. Saul's death marked the end of an era for Israel. The path was now open for David to take the throne that God had promised him. But the new king would face many challenges before uniting a nation broken by war and defeat. And so we come to the end of our journey through the book of 1 Samuel. We've witnessed the rise and fall of Israel's first king, the secret anointing of David, and the many trials he endured while fleeing Saul's persecution. This story shows us how God works even through the hardest moments to fulfill his purposes. If you enjoyed this deep dive into 1 Samuel, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos on the books of the Bible. We've got much more content planned to help you engage with Scripture in a dynamic and meaningful way. Share this video with friends and family who want to deepen their biblical understanding. Every share helps us reach more people with the transformative message of God's Word. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video as we continue our journey through the powerful stories of the Bible.